This video intro doesn't violate any copyright laws, at least I think.
I mean, I think that's good enough, right? What is up, guys? It is King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh! Back again with yet another deck profile that I am confident calling pretty good. Guys, I've got Lair of Darkness here, and it is a banging control deck nowadays, due to the fact that it can search pretty much any normal trap in the game and use it effectively. And we just recently got some new support out of Eternity Code, which really helped the deck remain recursive and keep up with today's top tier control decks, because I think that was one of its biggest weaknesses before. Was not only was it reliant on a field spell, it just had trouble recurring. If you could not get your win in a couple turns, you would get out resourced. But that was also when the deck was mostly competing with, you know, things like Sky Striker, Altergeist, which Altergeist has climbed back up. You know, and other things like that, and Orcust, even when it was at full power, it's still around, but now it's in Rogue rather than one of the top tier. And it just had trouble keeping up. The new support, even though you just splash in a couple copies of it, really help. And I think you're going to like the way that I'm playing this. I have this built at more of a fun tier, but when I get to those fun tier techs, I'll be sure to point those out and tell you what to replace it with in order to make your deck as competitive as possible. But I have it built for the tier level, or I guess the competitive level that I would be playing maybe with friends and stuff like that right now, just because the format doesn't exist. Locals isn't really a thing even that much where I am. So yeah, I'm just kind of chilling, having fun, playing certain things just because I like them, even though I know they're not the most competitive option. But like I said, I've still got this built in a really competitive fashion. You can take those couple little bits of what I call fun tier techs and replace those with more competitive options. And like I said, we'll touch on those when we get to them. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the profile. We will start with our monsters. We start out with one copy of our big guy here, Darkest Diabolos. And that says Diabolos, not Diablos. So everybody out there pronounces it wrong, and it drives me bonkers, actually. There's an O there, probably because the TCG translations didn't want us straight up playing with the devil. So they threw in an extra O. So this guy's Darkest Diabolos. If you're here, by this point in time, I'm going to assume that you know what he does. But it's not really our win condition anymore to be sitting on a Diabolos. So he's in there at 1 because you can search him. And he's pretty good, but not our win condition anymore. Back in the previous way that I played Lair of Darkness, I had some kind of more build a good board setup, and this is much different from that. So he's just there kind of if you get him, cool. If not, you don't need him to win. Next, we've got 2 Artifact Scythe and 1 Artifact Moral Tech. You know what this does probably as well if you're a competitive player, but if you're not and you're unfamiliar with Scythe, what you do is you combo this off usually with Sanctum, and it special summons it, and once it's special summoned, your opponent cannot summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. And then when you bring out Moral Tech, that allows you to pop a card. So these are really cool too, though, because in Lair, people are expecting you to have back row, and they'll often try to pop it. And if you draw one of these in your hand, you can set it, and if your opponent does remove it, it summons itself, and then boom, you get its effect anyway. So these are very useful in this deck and very versatile. They're not as bricky as you think if you draw into them, but we really want to get that Scythe summon off especially, so that's why we pack in the Sanctums, just because that's a more consistent way to bring it out and not depend on our opponent destroying it in order for that to happen. Next, we've got 3 Arima. This mainly, I almost said mostly and mainly at the same time, so I almost said mastely. This mainly is your additional copies of your Lair of Darkness field spell, but occasionally you top deck it, you contribute a token and search out a Diabolos or something, or whatever, or just draw a couple cards, or not a couple cards, you just draw 1 card, excuse me. You can draw a card with him. You just don't use that effect as often because you really want to get out your Lilith and or Malice right away. So yeah, this is mostly terraforming, but it's got a pretty cool effect on board as well. Next, we've got 3 Lilith. Of course, this is actually our win condition right here. We want to get to her as quickly and consistently as possible. And right now I've got the consistency up to 57% of the time you have a pathway to get to Lilith, which is pretty good for a rogue deck. So try to improve that if you can, if you want to. But so far I think I've got it the best that it can get without being clunky. So Lilith is great. Lilith? What the heck is going on with the way that I'm talking? Well, nothing new for those that are used to me, but I can never talk well. Lilith is really good because even if you bring it out off of Tour Guide, you still get to neg your opponent by tributing their stuff. You just don't get the effect to search for a trap. But if you just bring out Lilith on just by summoning it or with Ties of the Brethren, which we do pack in this deck, it's super dope because you get that tribute to make them go neg while you go plus and search for a trap. So she is amazing in basically your win condition to keep control of the board and so on. And next we've got 2 Malice. A lot of decks are just throwing in 1. I think 2 is better just because it's what helps you recur and stay in the game. Yes, you have easy access to it and you can bring it out off of Tour Guide, but what people aren't considering is Tour Guide negates her effects and you actually want her effects. Like, it's pretty dope to be able to tribute 1 monster on your side of the field and 1 on theirs in order to reset a trap. But, you know, you also want to be able to actually reset the trap. So negating her effect is kind of no bueno. You don't want to do that. So what I recommend is bringing her out using Ties of the Brethren or searching her with Sangan, which we have a copy of. So she's really good to help you recur those traps and use them again and so on. And it helps, again, this deck's whole thing is tributing your opponent's monsters. And sometimes you may not look like you have the advantage, but rather than gain advantage, you're making your opponent go negative and just miss out on plays because you've gotten rid of key combo pieces and so on. Next, we've got Tour. Gosh, I can't talk. 2 Tour Guide. Nailed it first try. We've got 2 Tour Guide because we have some Exceeds plays we can make. You can bring out a Sangan. You can do lots of things if you top deck it. Or if, you know, worst case scenario, you're not going to get the Lilith search for a trap, but you can at least bring out your Lilith and then use Lilith's effect to just tribute your opponent's things, even if you don't get that search. Oh, and one thing I do want to go over is I saw someone claiming that Malice doesn't tribute for cost. That's not true. You need to realize that the way that this sentence is structured, from my understanding, both of these cards tribute as cost. If I'm wrong, hit me in the comments, tell me, hey, Lilith does. We can confirm that Lilith does. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember who I heard or saw say that, or, you know, what I read or where it was, I can't remember. But they were claiming that this does not tribute as cost. I'm not seeing the difference between these two. So far, I've been playing as if Malice tributes as cost. Feel free to correct me. Even if the case is that she doesn't, the worst case scenario is it's now a negatable effect rather than tributing as cost. So it doesn't change much. It just changes when your opponent is allowed to react to her. So just thought I'd draw attention to that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain Malice tributes for cost. Next, we've got Sangan, just at 1. You can run more, but I don't believe that it's necessary because, again, you're not using this as a path to something else. It's just there as the occasional plus. If it happens, great. If you tribute it with Lilith off of bringing it out with Ties, awesome, you get another search. If you bring it out with Tour Guide, you make an Exceeds monster, it hits the grave, additional search, whatever. So yeah, it's just there basically as a Ties target, honestly. Same for Skarm. It's a Ties target, and when it hits the grave, you get a search at the end to keep your win condition rolling and keep things balanced in your hand. And finally, we've got a fun tier tech that you should definitely not run competitively, but it's super fun. I threw in an Obelisk the Tormentor. I know everybody that's competitive right now just rolled their eyes and threw up, smashed their computer screens, and if they were subscribing, they just unsubscribed. But I really love Obelisk, and it actually kind of has some strange kind of synergy with this deck, with its tribute effect, and with the fact that you're constantly generating free tokens. You can easily get it out late game, which is why it's at 1. Because if you open on it, that sucks because you're not going to get it out. But if you draw into it late game and you've got control of the board, you can just win more for fun with Obelisk by tributing some of your tokens and little guys, and it's just fun to do. Again, I would recommend something else like an additional copy of Trap Trick, or even like, you know, Foolish Burial or something for some more consistency if you're into that kind of thing. But again, for fun, why not? Next, let's go into the spells. You never would have guessed this one. Lair of Darkness at 3. I know many of you are shocked. I am just spicing it up here with my choices. This is your win condition as well. This plus Lilith is your win condition, as well as like Super Poly, things like that. Because this allows you to, this is what gives you the ability to tribute your opponent's monsters. And this is what allows you to generate those free tokens. Remember though that tribute effect, being able to tribute your opponent's monster, you can only do 1 monster per turn. And that's on either player's turn. So just keep that in mind. This is not, you cannot continuously tribute your opponent's monsters in the same turn. That would be bonkers crazy. Next, we've got Called by the Grave at 3. Now I'm going to address the fact that one of these is black and white, and these are clearly not real cards. Maybe you can't tell. Guys, I own 3 copies of Called by the Grave. For those that are new to my channel, I make proxies of cards for a lot of my decks. That way I don't have to switch them around from deck to deck, but I only make proxies of cards that I already own and of the same amount of copies that I already own. I just do this for convenience, not because I have not invested in the cards. So just know that when you see a proxy, I already own however many copies you see. But this just helps me with being able to keep decks playable with my friends without having to switch them around. And it helps me with building deck profiles a little faster and not having to like find every card that I need. You know, I don't want to have to switch my Called by the Graves around every time I'm making a new deck. So there you go. That's it. If that bothers you, get out of here. I don't care. Next, we've got 2 Allure of Darkness. Same thing. I own this many. These are proxies, but this is very good for the deck. Now, for those of you that can afford it, I would actually recommend switching this out for Pot of Extravagance, because you don't rely on your extra deck that much, but I personally don't have the budget for it at the moment, so I'm playing Allure. It works. It's okay. But I think Extravagance would be a little better because you're not banishing your monsters away. At least not your main deck monsters. Next, we've got 2 Ties of the Brethren. Ties because, like Allure, or not Allure, like Tour Guide, you know, it brings out what you want to see. It helps you get to your Lilith or other things faster. I think balancing that out between 2 Tour Guide and gosh, I can't talk, and 2 of these is better than running this at 3 plus another Tour Guide. Plus the 2 Tour Guides. Wow, I can't talk. My goodness. Hopefully you can gather what the heck I'm trying to say. 3 was too many is all I'm getting at. Because, you know, you don't want to top deck Ties of the Brethren, especially if you're not winning. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to want to pay 2,000 life points, etc. So it's kind of one of those, it's like great if you open on it, but then for the rest of the duel, you kind of hope you don't top deck it. So that's why I'm running it at 2. It's a good card, but I don't feel that it's necessary at 3. If you disagree, take out the Obelisk, throw in the 3rd one, see what happens. Maybe it'll work for you. I don't know. Next, we've got 2 Super Poly. Lair of Darkness helps make everything a target for this. So whatever your opponent's playing, you have free removal this way, as long as you've got something to discard. So this is really dope. Then we've got Monster Reborn, just because we want to be able to recur that Lilith or even the Malice once in a while. And so that really helps with that. We've also got some other things for that. And finally, Terraforming, in order to get to our Lair of Darkness win condition just a little bit faster. And those are our spells. And now let's jump into the traps. What's interesting about the traps is you could really put anything you want in there, any type of disruption, and it would be effective. So if you see these and you're like, no, I don't like that one, you can definitely experiment and put in what traps you like best. But this is what I have so far. I've got 2 Artifact Sanctum. This is sometimes a win condition in itself because you can get to it very easily with Lilith, especially when you're packing 2 Trap Trick. So you can get to that Scythe, stall your opponent, and then just go for it and win. So, you know, you're probably not going to OTK, but as long as you can keep up the control and locking them out of things, it's awesome. So basically you're guaranteed a Sanctum. If you get Lilith out first turn, you're able to pull off its effect and you search for double Trap Trick, Artifact Sanctum, or vice versa, you know, double Sanctum, 1 Trap Trick. you're guaranteeing that you're going to get to Sanctum. So that's amazing. You know, 100% success right there, getting out the Scythe to stop your opponent. That's what I'm talking about. I think that's really what pushes this over the edge into being competitively viable. And that's why there's wiggle room with other things if you want to throw in some fun tier techs. This right here makes the deck the most competitive, in my opinion. So you have room, like I said, to play with other things. Next, we've got 2 Ballista Squad. Nothing like tributing your opponent's monster to get rid of yet another one of their resources. This is the definition of making them go negative right here. An amazing card. I highly recommend. Then we've got 2 Back to the Front, just because I like to recur my Lilith and keep her rolling, or even bring back something else just to make sure I constantly have this force field that my opponent has to deal with. So they're never quite killing me yet, because as long as you're alive, this deck is a lot more like Altergeist now, where as long as you didn't die yet, you could come back at any time. So you're just stalling a lot of the time and bringing back your Lilith, bringing back other things to tribute, and so on. So Back to the Front, really great because it's searchable, like I said. And finally, Metaverse, just because it's another copy of Lair of Darkness. If you didn't see it or a path to it, but you find your way to this on your opening, you set this, and boom, you've got your win condition on board, you've got your setup. So yeah, guys, that's all for the main deck. Let's hop into the extra deck here. Where did I put the extra deck? Oh my goodness. Oh, there it is. I see it. I'm a silly goose. I've got a bunch of cards all over the place, so I couldn't find it. All right, we will start with our not instant fusion, goodness gracious, with our super polymerization targets. We don't play instant fusion in this deck. How many mistakes is that? Like 32? Why are you guys still watching? All right. We've got our dark targets here. Usually we're going to hit with this one right off the bat, but this one, if you can get to it, is amazing because it becomes an interruption and it's a lot tougher to deal with. This one's okay. It's a little less prominent, but it's in there. And I think I had a couple more. That's right. They're all mixed up. Man, 33 mistakes. Then we've got Mud Dragon because that's still a useful super poly target, especially if maybe you didn't get, what do you call it? Even if you don't get Lair, occasionally this is still viable. And for Salamangrates, I recommend packing in this just because they're out there and they're tough to deal with. You know, they're a harder matchup for this deck. I mean, there are a lot of hard matchups, but they're one that can be easily thwarted with this guy. So there are our super poly targets. Next, we've got 2 Link Spider because you generate tokens a lot, but you can't often use those for certain link monsters and other things. So it's good to link into an effect monster. So that's what Link Spider does, is it gets rid of those tokens and just replaces them with an effect monster. Then we've got Phoenix just for some removal if we need to. Predaplant, Verte Anaconda, which makes it way easier to pull out a super poly play, especially if you've baited negates, gotten rid of certain things with Lilith, and you still need to deal with some other things. Bring out Verte Anaconda. Plow, they're gone. I just said plow instead of pow. There's 34 mistakes, and it sounded really strange. We're just going to deal with it. We're going to acknowledge that it was weird, and we're going to move on. Next, we've got Wee Witch, just because it's occasionally nice to get that 500 attack boost. The only thing is it kind of becomes inconsequential with, you know, everything being dark, it boosts them too. But let's say you don't have Lair and you want to boost yours, you can link into this. And it's just also good to use as link fodder to link up to other things. Because we're packing a bore load and stuff like that. Then we've got Artifact Dagda. This is really good for spicing up plays with the artifacts. Maybe you're down to the nitty gritty. And this is cool because it sets up artifact plays that your opponent will occasionally forget about. So when an effect of another card on the field is activated, you can set one artifact monster from your hand or deck to your spell and trap zone as a spell, but destroy it during your opponent's next end phase. So when it's destroyed, it'll come back and activate its effect, which is pretty dope. So you can do that to kind of put some pressure back onto your opponent because they know that that's going to happen. And if they get rid of it, you know what I mean? Like if they get rid of it, it's going to do it anyway. And so they know that's coming. They have to push and try and beat you that turn or you're going to stun or destroy. So really good card. And then, and you can also special summon an artifact monster from your graveyard if this card is destroyed by your opponent, I believe. So yeah, only during your opponent's turn rather. And then finally, Borreload Dragon, just because it's okay to sometimes just crash into something and steal it. So this is a very versatile card. I prefer this over Boral Sword in this deck just because you need ways to get rid of things rather than just push for an OTK. You can kind of get to the end gradually and chip away without really needing Boral Sword, but if you prefer that, go for it. It's up to you. We've got 2 Phantom Knights of Breaksword because you can make rank 3s really easily, and this deck will not always get to go first, so occasionally this becomes a great way to pop something, get your Sanguine Search, and be set up for the next turn as long as you can stun. And then of course we also have another rank 3, number 75, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, just as a further interruption and a way for you to get to something, and it's a stun card essentially to stop an effect and hopefully draw what you need, and so on. So that's it for the extra deck, guys. I hope you love this deck so far. It is one of my favorites to play. And I'll briefly go over the side deck, but again, this is like fun tier whatever. Side deck what fits for your competitive level right now. But because the format doesn't exist, I just kind of threw some fun stuff into the side deck to kind of mess with my opponent. Definitely don't follow this advice. I mean, you can if you want, but throw what's necessary. Like, this should probably be evenly matched, but here we are with Storming Mirror Force because it's fun. We've got D-Barrier, Eradicator, and Heavy Storm. So just some traps to put in for different situations that could be just blowout game winners. Then for some spells, because occasionally we're going to be made to go second, so traps aren't always effective going second. We've got Mind Control, 2 Enemy Controller, because we contribute our opponent's things. And then Monster Gate for the same reason. We've got Legendary Maju Garzette, just because it's kind of fun to bring it out with high attack. And then it synergizes with Diabolos. And then we've got 2 Mana Dragon Zernatron, because you bet your opponent is going to be packing back row removal, and this allows that to punish them for removing your back row. So yeah, again, don't follow this at all. I've done this for my competitive level in this area because, like I said, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really exist right now. I'm just chilling. I'm having fun. But yeah, so replace those with much more competitive options and you should be good to go. Thanks guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me, and like the video, and see ya.